Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies. And in this week's show, we are talking about Split, which is the new film from M. Night Shyamalan. We'll start spoiler free, like we usually do with new releases, and we will give you spoiler warning halfway through. Before we even talk about the movie, actually, I just want to say, first of all, apologies, this is a little bit later in the week than we usually get the episodes up. That's mainly because schedules and things. I think Tim had someone visiting, I had a weird schedule going on, so it get pushed a couple of days, so we're a little bit later. So apologies for that. Number two, I can't talk about it much during this section of the review. I'll save most of it for spoilers, because I have to talk about spoilers to really talk about it. But a big element of this film is spoiled for me. Not because someone specifically told me something, but because regular news sites kept posting headlines that let me figure something out. And I saw it 5 days after release, and that was still not short enough to avoid having things spoiled by normal news sites. Not you know, assholes on Twitter, not assholes on a message board, anything like that. News sites.
What I find really annoying about that is I think people think if they don't like specifically say what it is, that it's not like, gonna do any harm. Like, just like sometimes just the headlines or the screenshots, like that's all you need.
Yeah, it's context. You see the image with the headline, you're like, okay. Yeah. And what was worse with this one especially was like, I'd see one article, and then I'd see another article, and then when you put them together, it was like, alright, okay, I guess I've figured that out. But I'll talk about that properly in spoilers so I can actually talk about what they spoiled and so on. And there'll be a full-on rant when we get there, I promise you that. And the other thing is, obviously this is M. Night Shyamalan, and this is a director who, of course, I really liked in the early part of his career. Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, really good. I haven't seen The Village since it came out. I remember thinking it was fine at the time. It maybe hasn't aged well. Lady in the Water, not so good. Happening, trash. And I've not seen Last Airbender or After Earth, but everything I hear is they are the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
We actually reviewed The Visit on this show. We did that in 2015, which was better than The Happening. I liked it a little bit more than you did, but I didn't even like it that much. I thought it was okay. I thought the simplicity worked well, but the found footage and some of the elements were a bit off, and you hated it more than I did, because you hated the characters, I think, more than anything.
It was more than that, but yeah, that was a big part of it. But overall, I really didn't like it. Yeah,
so it's just funny then, starting 2017, our first review was of It Watches, which was a terrible movie where it was like some student, or not even a student, like a dropout of film school, tried to make something and was horrendous. Last week we saw the first cinema release that we did this year, which was The Bye Bye Man, and it was maybe it may actually be the worst movie I've ever seen in the theatre. Like, really? I've seen worse at home. Like, because obviously It Watches was worse, but in the theatre, I can't think of a worse one.
That's a good question. I don't know. I've seen some pretty crappy stuff in the theater, but I'd really have to try to reach back and think about it.
But the reason why I'm telling you
it's definitely up there, though.
Yeah, the reason why I'm setting this up, though, the reason why I'm describing what we had the last couple of weeks is because I was kind of laughing going into this week going, it's up to M. Night Shyamalan to break our streak of crap. It's up to M. Night Shyamalan, the man who has not impressed us in over a decade, to somehow get us out of this funk and give us a good film. And I don't know if this is going to shock you, Tim, but I think he succeeded.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay, right, interesting. Okay, we got a fight on our hands. This is going to be fun.
No, I'm not gonna like say that I hated this, that it was awful. But and I don't want to try to make like a pun or sound like I'm doing a joke, but I am kind of split on it.
I knew exactly what you were going to say, because you prefaced it a lot. You're like, yeah, I'm not making a pun. I'm not trying to make a joke.
Yeah.
But I'm split on it.
It's one of those things where, like, sometimes where you think, like, I don't want to say that, but then when you think that, it's like, well, now that's the only thing I can think of. But, yeah, I kind of, like, I would say I liked about half of it and hated about the other half. It's kind of right down the middle for me. It is definitely a lot better than The Visit and a lot better than the last two movies that we watched, for sure, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, I think that's clear. I think I think, Tim, even if you hated this movie, if you come in here and told me this was worse than or on par with the last two, I'd have told you were a filthy liar. Get out.
Yeah. And there's definitely a lot of like really shining points of the movie. I think James McAvoy being one of them. I thought.
He is acting circles around everyone in this. It is insane how good he is.
Yeah, and it was just such a like pleasure to watch him. Like, very very interesting choices, and it really just like sucked you in whenever he was on screen, and it built like some very like proper tension throughout the
some good tension, some surprising tension I wasn't expecting. I'll explain what the premise is, because you might be watching this non-spoiler part without really knowing what the movie is. So James McAvoy plays a character whose real name is Kevin, but he has a very specific type of like split personality disorder where he has 23 very distinct personalities, and he kidnaps these three girls at the start of the movie. That's the premise, and he has them locked up, and every time he comes in to see them, it seems like he has a different personality, and it becomes clear that it's not just one person, it's kind of multiple, and they're held captive, and he's keeping them there for something. We don't know what it is, but he keeps saying, well, you're here for a reason, and it builds up, and obviously that would be getting into spoiler territory to talk about what that is, but that's the main gist of the movie. And throughout we also get flashbacks of the main character, Casey, who's one of the main girl, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who was in The Witch last year. She keeps popping up.
I almost didn't recognize her at first, until I, like, once I kind of realized I could see it, but yeah, at first I didn't realize that.
I recognized her right away. I think she's got a very distinct mouth, as strange as that sounds. Like, as soon as I seen her, like, the mouth is like, yeah, that's her from The Witch. But I get what you mean. She's not in the old-timey get
like
up.
The
and
clothes are different, the hair is different. And
a different hair colour. Yeah, she does look a lot different, but so she's in this, and we get flashbacks to her childhood, and that she has like her own personal arc throughout the movie, which goes on. So that's the gist of the thing. And we also have a psychiatrist character who Kevin goes to see as his different personalities, and that gives us a sort of window into a lot of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So that's what the movie's about. And I think the trailer was surprisingly good, because I was optimistic about it, more so than I normally would be with a Shyamalan movie. And I got everything I kind of expected from the trailer. There was a lot of good acting from McAvoy. There was a lot of good, like, sharp strings on the soundtrack. And even just something as simple as where he's got them in this room, but there's all these, it's like industrial hallways, like, around the area. And just all these like sort of like tracking shots of like the pipes and the lights going out down the hallway as it would like fade to black, and you hear this sharp string. So like it built a mood. It built a very off kilter sort of atmosphere, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I actually had pretty high hopes going in, because the trailer was really exciting, and I actually had quite a number of friends that saw it and were, I don't want to say raving about it, but everyone had like a lot of like really good things to say.
Yeah. So would you say that out of your group of friends you were on the more negative side compared to them? Oh
yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So I think McAvoy's great. I think it's actually mostly really well directed. It feels, and this is the baffling thing to me, is that Shyamalan, his early films, I love the direction in those. I think if you go back and watch Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, you see a lot of really subtle, very deliberate camera movement. You see a lot of really stylistic things that really make it what it is. And I feel like some of that was back in this. I feel like I was seeing things where the camera was very deliberate. He was doing very specific things. He was keeping things out of frame, where they needed to be. Some gorgeous stuff in like silhouette when there's like some dark tunnels later on in the movie when they're chasing, people are running from things and whatnot. And you get this really creepy, horrific kind of visuals. It looks really cool.
Yeah. I think like especially there's some really good highlights with like McAvoy. I feel like depending on who he was in the moment, like he might be lighted a certain way to appear more menacing or like more innocent. And
the direction assisted with the character changes along with his acting, which was obviously very on point. McAvoy is obviously the star of the film. I wouldn't say he steals it because he's maybe the star anyway, but he really is. He does carry it, a lot of it himself. If I'm getting any criticisms, there's a couple of very minor things that I can't talk about till spoilers. But the big one I can talk about. My one main criticism that I would, the psychiatrist character. I think she was a pretty bad actress.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't great. I didn't really have any like, you know, like noticeable reaction to her, like as opposed to when we watched the Bye Bye Man, and I was like, oh, these people are awful.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's fair. I think it's a combination of two things. I think part of it is that she very much is, here's the woman who's going to give us all of the theory and exposition.
There was some like huge exposition dumps.
There was a scene in particular because she's a psychiatrist and she's got all these theories about the split personalities and how they're all distinct people, and how one personality is allergic to something but the rest aren't, even though it's the same body. And she gives this like lecture over Skype, and she drops all of this like info on us. And while a lot of it was relevant, I almost feel like the movie would have worked even just a little bit better if we didn't get a lot of this. If it just let us think about it ourselves as we were watching it, it would have played more. I think there was a couple of key points we still needed to get from her, but a lot of it felt like a bit too much. And then the other thing, and maybe you're going to call me crazy for this, she reminded me of someone else.
Okay.
She reminded me of I wouldn't say a character, but of an actress in another film.
Okay.
She reminded me of the mother in Birdemic. I don't know if it's maybe because the actress is from a similar part of the country and she's got the same accent or what. But do you remember the mother in Birdemic, the one who like the girl takes the boy to go see her mum, and she's like, "Oh, and I was in this business for 12 years, but it's so nice that you finally got a boyfriend." And it was just everything she said reminded me of her, and it was so weird. I'm like, it's not that she's as bad as her. It was reminding me of her, and it was really drawing my attention.
Yeah. No, I get that. Again, it's like one of those little like worms that gets in your brain, and you can't get it out. It's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
She made some. We'll get into
spoilers. Yeah.
Spoilers, but she made some moves that annoyed me.
I feel like this will be more heavily spoiler side than it will be, this video, just because the way the movie's set up, the way it's structured, the way it plays off, everything's mostly in the spoilers. But I will say, I did like the ending. I liked, and I can't say why without going into spoilers, I did like everything it did. I thought Casey's character, Anya Taylor-Joy's character, I thought her arc, well, a little on the nose at times, was a very dark and kind of satisfying arc. You know when the place she gets to by the time our story ends, I enjoyed the story it told through that, and it was disturbing, it was dark, it fit the mood of the film, and regardless of anything else, she did sort of have a completed story which made the film feel like a whole, which it will be more relevant when I get to spoilers and why I think that's an important statement to make. I think the two girls that go with her, who obviously aren't as important because I've not mentioned them that much, they're kind of fine. The acting's not as good as her, as Anya Taylor-Joy or Mcavoy, obviously, but I think they're fine for what they are. There's some weird decisions about splitting them away from her at one point, and they kind of feel like they vanish for a lot of the movie.
Yeah, it almost seems kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that happened. But otherwise, I thought it was tense. McAvoy gives a great performance. As much as the psychiatrist stuff, I didn't like her. McAvoy in those scenes when he was with her, because there's a scene where he's one personality, and she believes he's lying about what personality he is, and she's trying to get him to admit that he's actually the other one. And his eyes in this scene, as he was like debating whether or not he should like cave and tell the truth about who he is, and then when he finally shifts to the other character and like admits that he's being the other one, is perfect.
It was so great. Like just the way that he was able to transform without like, the camera shifting or him putting on like a mask or something. It was great.
It was mannerisms. It was the way his eyes looked. It was everything. It was great. The way it would smile or not smile, the way he'd shift between everything was great. I mean, I would say the movie is absolutely worth seeing just for his performance, even if everything else fails for you.
and I would say like again, I don't want to sound too negative because again, I'm not saying that I hated it, like absolutely hated it. It's just all my problems were with yeah, like the other characters and the therapist and stuff. Like if the movie was like really like most like just McAvoy, like if it was just if I like it was just isolating him alone, I would be like raving about it.
Here's the thing about the other characters, the other girls, and they get kidnapped with her. I will say this: they didn't bother me. Like as much as I'm sort of critiquing it because I'm thinking from a story perspective, why did this happen? But they didn't bother me, and I also liked it because they set up the idea that Anya Taylor-Joy is a bit of a weirder character. She's been invited to this party that one of them's had for their birthday or whatever, and they've invited her out of necessity because they've invited everyone else in the class, and it'd be rude not to. But they think she's weird. We get a little bit of exposition as to like she's a bit weird, doesn't really talk to anyone, she's always in detention, that kind of stuff. And she does react differently to the situation once they realise they've been kidnapped. They wake up in the room. What I really liked, and because I think most horror movies and movies like this would do this, is they would team up against her. They would start freaking out about her. They would make her feel like shit because she's different, and that never happened. In fact, at one point later in the film, when they are separated, they even say, "Oh, we need to go back and get her." They still care about her, and they still want to go and help her. So, as much as they do, okay, she's a bit of a weirdo. They never turn into cliched teenage characters where they just hate her for being weird. They try and act like human beings, which I thought was a nice touch because I expected them to. I expected them to be bitches, and they weren't.
Yeah, like especially when the first girl kind of gets separated, then you kind of think the other one is gonna like start lashing out at her or something, like accuse it, like say, "Oh, this is your fault" or something. But yeah, they really didn't. Then they were more like, "Oh, like let's like kind of bond together." Maybe not like super bonding, but like let's like make sure that we're like in this together.
Yeah. So. I will say that I think that is a something worth praising because I was expecting that to go a different, more cliched route.
Yeah.
I don't have much else to say without spoilers. Honestly, I have a lot to say with spoilers, but not a lot without. So, any final kind of thing you want to say before we jump into spoilers?
No, I have my problems, but there was enough in it that I liked. I wasn't mad or that I saw it, and I would recommend people seeing it. There's definitely enough that's worth your money and your attention.
I will say, one thing I want to say before we go to spoilers actually is that this is a film with a vision. I feel like a director had an idea and he wanted to do everything to have that vision, even if that includes giving him a pointless cameo, which he always seems to give himself. That said, though, his cameo was fine in this. It didn't bother me. Like, I think there's been other ones because I think even though I like Signs, the cameo he gave himself in Signs was kind of an important character, and it felt really weird.
Yeah.
Whereas here it is just a one scene, couple of lines, and he's gone. Like, whatever. Yeah. It's not a big deal. He can deliver a couple of lines without it feeling weird. But it does kind of take you out of the movie though, because you kind of chuckle and go, "That's Shyamalan." But. No, it has a vision. It has a very clear, distinct vision. It didn't feel like someone stumbling over themselves, and it felt like he cared about this movie. And maybe that's what's been missing for like the last decade. He's been doing, this adaptation on a anime series, or he's been doing this. Some people are going to correct me and say Last Airbender's not an anime. You know what I mean? He's been doing this big budget After Earth thing with Will Smith. Maybe those like he's trying to work in the studio system. He's trying to do these big budget things. Maybe the difference here, maybe the thing that's really brought him back to an extent is this is a small film that I care about. This was an idea. I wanted to do this, and maybe that's why. Because it's baffling to me that he went from doing really fantastic stuff to just sinking to the absolute bottom with the last like three or four movies. And then The Visit was a bit better, but still kind of rough. And then for me, this is maybe not quite as excellent as his first three, but it's not miles, a million miles away from it anymore. It's like I'm kind of feeling like he's back, which is weird.
I mean, I think at the at the bare minimum, like the more stuff he does, like from this point on, it's gonna be, like there was a time like after The Happening where it's kind of like, oh man, a new Shyamalan movie, but now it's funny. I think it's a little less now. It's like, a new Shyamalan movie. This might be good.
For the first 4 or 5 movies, obviously it was like around the 5th one where it started to really dip, but
Yeah.
There was a time in high school when I was excited by a new Shyamalan movie, and then it got to a point after the happening where I just ignored new Shyamalan movies because they were probably horrible. And now I'm like going to be up. I mean, obviously there was that decade of shit, and that'll be in the back of my head, and it won't get my expectations won't be super high always because I'll always have that doubt. But at least next time I'll be like, this might be good.
Yeah.
So
did you ever end up seeing Devil with like the guys trapped in the elevator?
yeah, he didn't direct that, but I did see it. Yeah, he produced that.
Oh, he just produced it?
Yeah, he didn't direct that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, my mistake. Yeah, I was just trying to think of like his other movies, like you mentioned at the start. And it's been a long time since I've gone back and watched them, and I think I would be kind of interested, like, to see how they hold up.
I think the first three definitely do.
Yeah.
But some people debate on Signs. Some people think Signs is the first one that was the dip. To me, I mean, I don't like it as much as the first two, but I still think it's a really solid movie. But hey, that's beauty of movies, subjective and all that. But let's get into some spoilers.
All right, let's do it.
As Tim is stroking his cat, I think, off screen.
She doesn't often lay right here in front of the TV, but I think she wants attention.
They get all that sometimes. All right, full spoilers then from this point on for Split, and I'm going to warn you again because the first thing I'm going to talk about here is spoilers. Full spoilers for Split, including the ending and anything related. Okay, so now I've give you a spoiler warning for Split. I also have to give you a spoiler warning for something else, and this itself was a spoiler for Split, which is why I made clear to really emphasize that full spoilers from that last sentence. So full spoilers for Split, but also full spoilers for Unbreakable. Here's where I get my rant, Tim, because I really want to complain about this. Before we actually talk about the implications of the movie, because most of what I have to say is positive, but I want to complain that this was spoiled for me.
Feel free, rant away.
Within 24 hours of goddamn release, websites had to start posting news stories. Even if they thought, oh, we're not being spoilery because we're not saying what it is or whatever. I saw one headline that said, James McAvoy on board for sequel to spoiler. I'm like, that's weird. Why would this? I mean, I guess it ruins the eight. Me at the time assuming it's a spoiler to Split. I'm like, why would they? I mean, obviously it maybe spoils that he's alive at the end of the movie. Maybe that's the spoiler, but like, it still felt weird. Like, why would you spoil that? Next day, Shyamalan's going to do Unbreakable 2 next. I'm like, all right, okay, fair enough. All right. Day 3. There was another Unbreakable 2 coming next from Shyamalan, and then at the bottom though, it's underneath the title. It said, "Warning: this article contains spoilers for Split." I'm like, that's weird. Why would there be spoilers for Split in an article about Unbreakable 2? And then it was actually just yesterday. It was I didn't remember who posted the other ones, but this one yesterday was comicbook.com. I'm calling you out, you assholes. Post on Twitter, they posted a link to an article called 5 Secret Sequels We'd Love to See. No mention of Split, right? And I'm like, oh, 5, what's that about? That sounds interesting. Because it just says 5 secret sequels. And the image was of, like, I think Fight Club. And I was like, oh, whatever, right? Maybe that's just one of the ones they want to see. That's fine. Click on it. And their auto-played video at the start starts with clips from Split. I always pause that immediately. Otherwise, I watch their auto-played video, right? So that's not a big deal. But right away, because some of them are just like sort of generic and they keep coming up for multiple articles. Didn't think much of it. Scroll down, right? So now that secret sequels are a thing, I'm like, something's a secret sequel? The image underneath this sentence was of Split on one side and Unbreakable on the other.
Okay.
And of course, as soon as I seen this, this was the nail in the coffin. This was where it just like, are you serious?
Yeah.
And then I immediately thought back to all those other articles, and I'm like, wait a minute, those all, now in retrospect, they all make sense. And then, like, several times last night, and even this morning, I saw more articles about Unbreakable 2 happening. I'm like, this is why they're all talking about it. This is...
Yeah.
And all I could think was, these assholes, all of them, every single website that had to post something. I mean, fair enough, talk about Unbreakable 2 being announced, because I don't think that in and of itself's bad. You just say Unbreakable 2 has been planned, Shyamalan's doing it next, fine. Right? But all these... McAvoy's on board for spoiler, and this article contains spoilers for Split, and then that secret sequels list bullshit that was obvious. And then the funny thing is, I went back up to the top, see that auto-played video? I let it play for the first 10 seconds to see what it did. And do you know what it started with? Well, now that it's been 4 days, we're not going to get too spoilery, but we will say that Split is a secret sequel to another movie.
4 days?
Yeah, 4 or 5 days, whatever. I think it was 5. And I was just like, that's a huge spoiler. That, like, from context, from everything else on the internet that I'm not even looking for, it's just headlines. I didn't click in any of these other articles because it said there's spoilers for this in this article for Split. So obviously I'm not going to click on it. It's just none of you could hold back. None of you could do it. You had to all jump on this because it was an exciting thing to talk about, like a bunch of assholes. And because of that, I had this ruined for me. And this was especially painful because I love Unbreakable. Unbreakable is my favourite Shyamalan film. I think it's a goddamn masterpiece. I love it to death. And I knew before I seen this, assuming that I was right, because there was a small chance I was wrong. Maybe I jumped to conclusions kind of thing before I'd seen it. I didn't feel like it, but you know, there was always a chance.
Yeah.
And I thought, when this happens in this movie, I would have been so excited. But now I'm just going to be like, oh, here it is. Here's the moment. And the moment, the first thing that happens that links it is a bit of music. You hear some music from Unbreakable come in. I would have lost my shit had I not known about this when it came in, because I recognised that the first few piano notes, I'm like, that sounds like Unbreakable. And then it properly kicked into the theme. I would have got so excited. I would have been jumping it, well, not literally, but I'd have been jumping for joy. I would have been so pumped. This would have excited me so much. I've been wanting a sequel to Unbreakable for so goddamn long.
It would have been like the next thing since like seeing like Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man. Like that'd be like the closest thing I can relate it to.
But the thing, but it would have meant even more to me than that because this was more personal. Because when I saw Iron Man, I didn't even know who Nick Fury was. You know, it was a cool little tease, but it didn't mean anything to me. Whereas this was like, oh shit, this is actually connected to one of your favourite movies and you didn't know? That is so cool. And it was robbed from me because the goddamn media couldn't keep their mouths shut for 5 days. 5 days.
And
assholes.
the thing that's and the thing that's annoying about it is like a lot of people will say, oh, well, if you don't want to be spoiled, just stay off the internet. It's like, well, all right, first of all, in this day and age, that's almost impossible.
Yeah, that's stupid. That's like going off grid. That is just...
Yeah. And then also it's like, well, actually, it's not like...
Just to back on that point, right? I'd even accept that if this was a sequel to something and I knew it'd be something that I wanted to avoid spoilers for. But that was the point here. This was a secret sequel. I didn't know there was something like this to be spoiled.
Yeah, but it's also, it's just a few days. Like, it's one thing, like, if it's been out for 3 weeks, a month, or whatever, like, you know, if you were really excited about it, you probably would have seen it by then. But yeah, it's just a few days. And again, like, to your point, you're not going out and looking for it. You're not like, you know, it'd be one thing if you're looking up like Split reviews or something, which still they shouldn't be spoilering, or they should have spoiler warnings, but still that's a little different, at least if you're looking at related content or something. But
Joey really pisses me off is that I don't even have a problem with like the art. Obviously they're going to have to put articles about it. That's fine. Yeah. Here's how you title it, right? So that you give me nothing, but you warn me sufficiently. You just simply put Shyamalan's follow-up to Split. You know, so Shyamalan's going to do his next movie, but there's spoilers for Split. We can't talk about it without spoiling it. I won't click on it. It gives me nothing.
Yeah,
it makes me think there might be a sequel to Split, maybe, but it doesn't give me a hint that it's related to something else. It would have kept that completely secret. But instead, every way they phrased it, even though they were dancing around the actual word Unbreakable, or they were dancing around the whatever word they wanted, in context, you could just put them together and it fit, and you got it, and it was heartbreaking because this would have been such a huge twist, or not even a twist. I wouldn't call it a twist. It's a reveal. It's a reveal.
No, and of course they don't care because they just want clicks. Doesn't matter. But now there was something that annoyed me, which it isn't as bad as what happened to you.
Go for it.
But it's also something that really annoyed me, and it's probably putting a lot more on myself than like people or the movie or whatever. But I like kept seeing so many people talking about a twist. Like they kept like, people were just posting stuff like, "Oh my god, I couldn't believe the twist at the end." And like you said, first of all, it's not even really a twist, but still, that's what people are saying. And they're like, "Oh my god, the twist," or like, "Oh, like make sure you don't read about the twist before you go see it." I heard so much about this twist that throughout the whole movie, I couldn't help but think like, "Oh, I bet that's what the twist is gonna be, or that's what it's gonna be."
You're thinking, oh, one of the girls is actually his personality. It's not
that
like
was
you were
that
thinking
was
that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like that was one of my theories. It was gonna be like something like that, or that everyone, like the therapist and the girls and everything, was a whatever, and or that the girl was also gonna have, or the main character Casey was also gonna have DID, and like it just really distracted me because there were points where my focus is shifting a little bit from the movie to trying to get ahead of what it's gonna be, and again, it's not like technically no one spoiled anything for me, but still, just all the talk of like, oh, look out for the twist, don't read about the twist, like, can we just like not talk about stuff?
I appreciate our group on Facebook. Everyone who'd seen it before I did.
Oh yeah.
Even when they said, "Oh, I would really like the movie. I really want to talk to someone about the ending." They never said the word twist. They never said the word reveal or anything like that. They just said they were excited about it, and that got me pumped. It was I seen the excitement, and that was enough. I didn't need any more. I didn't ruin anything, and that's fine. Now, obviously, if you may be watching us and going, this is such first world problems," and it is. Like, I'm not.
Oh sure, yeah.
It is. It's just, but we're here to talk about a movie. We obviously love movies, and in this particular case, I love Unbreakable. So it hurt a lot when that first time experience of that discovery was ruined for me. It really pissed me off. Now, we're past that. Let's stop ranting.
Okay.
Let's talk. We spent a good 10 minutes on that. Let's talk about the actual movie and what this connection to Unbreakable does to it. First of all, when I went back and looked at the poster, it's and this made sense on its own because of the premise of the movie, but it's actually McAvoy behind like glass that's cracking, which is very reminiscent of the poster for Unbreakable. So there's little hints there, which is cool.
Interesting.
But what is this movie? And obviously, since I knew there was a connection, I kind of realised what it was like halfway through. I kind of got what the whole point of it was because it was connected to Unbreakable. But Unbreakable, of course, was a very realistic, down-to-earth take on a superhero origin. So what Split is, it's the other side of that coin. It is a very down-to-earth, I'm not going to say realistic, but grounded take on a supervillain origin.
Yeah. What I kind of like along the lines of that, at first I was expecting them to go like full on, like, he keeps talking about the beast, and I was expecting like a big transformation. But then what we get is more subdued. Like there is like super human stuff going on, but it's not like over the top.
Well, it kind of goes back to Unbreakable, that whole idea in Unbreakable which obviously isn't a horror film, but which is actually one of the things I love about this idea, this being the supervillain origin, is that this is a horror film because it's about the villain and he should be scary. Yeah. It's kind of like, because now they keep trying to do like villain movies, or they keep talking about doing them all. We're going to do a Black Adam, we're going to do a Sinister Six movie, we're going to do a Venom movie, and you kind of like, how are you going to do that? This is actually how you do it. The villain movie shouldn't be the villain as the protagonist, because that's really weird and hard to do. The villain movie should just be, the villain's still the villain, but the superhero's not there to save the day. And that's scary. Imagine a Joker like attack when Batman's not around. How terrifying is he then? That's what the villain movie, if you're going to do a standalone villain movie, that's probably how to do it in a lot of cases. Obviously you get more complex ones where there's shades of grey and all that, and maybe you can do a kind of anti-hero-esque spin on it. But that was a really cool idea to me, that it's a completely different genre. That's a very subdued superhero movie, and then this is a thriller, horror, building up this bad guy, which really works. I really like that. I like that it is the other side of that coin that presumably will set up a movie where this is his arch nemesis. This is David Dunn's, and they even give him a name. The Horde. Like he's got a name. So I think that's really cool. It again, the whole powers of it being kind of slightly super. Like in the Unbreakable, he's indestructible, but he doesn't even realize it until he's in his like 40s. He has kind of like visions of bad things bad people have done, but it's shown as an extension of instinct. That's how Samuel L. Jackson's character explained it. And here we hear about all these split personalities and how one can be allergic to something, one can be, and like their bodies can even change, their chemistry can change to like. So the idea that this monster, that it is essentially the 24th personality that it becomes at the end, like becomes indestructible, kind of like Unbreakable. He's not called Unbreakable, but you know what I mean. Bruce Willis, David Dunn from Unbreakable. That idea that he's the polar opposite is really cool, and I really like what they've done here in setting this up. And there's a lot of other cool little ties I want to talk about. But what do you think of that core? It's the supervillain origin, and that we'll get that.
Oh, I definitely enjoyed it. Again, like I said, he was easily the most like entertaining and interesting part of the movie. Like you mentioned earlier, that scene where the therapist is giving the talk at that convention via Skype. It seemed a little like kind of hammy to me.
Yeah.
When she's talking about it, like, oh, I think this might be like the next stage of like human
that
like
was
evolution.
Because that was essentially the scene from Unbreakable where Samuel L. Jackson says, "Oh, what if like your instinct is actually more accurate than maybe what if your instinct is actually an extra ability and it's more." It was essentially that kind of thing, and because he says all these fantastical powers that people have in comic books, your X-ray vision, your flight, and all the rest. What if it's all just based on something as simple as instinct? And this felt like this movie's version of that, but it was just clunkier, and it felt a little bit more like she was just giving us all this exposition. But the great thing is that even if I think a lot of the movie works, and I think the biggest compliment I can give it is that if you take away the Unbreakable stuff at the end that connects it, it still works on its own as a movie about this crazy guy who abducts three girls, and she has her own arc, and we'll talk about that. Don't worry, we'll get to that after we've done all this Unbreakable related stuff, because it's obviously the big exciting thing to talk about. I think it works on its own, so I think, but even if it didn't to an extent, even if the only thing you liked was McAvoy, you should still kind of be excited for him being the villain in the next Unbreakable, because
certainly, yeah.
So I mean, and that extent it also works, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. Also, Kevin McAvoy's character, his whole thing, not Kevin himself, because we actually do get to meet Kevin as his own personality at one point in the movie, but the whole thing with the monster and the way he thinks, what he hates, his victims, the ones he wants to feed on, because he actually eats the two of the girls, the other two. He wants to feed on people who have never had to suffer. It's like people who have been coddled and are like they've never really had to go through any sort of trauma or things. Ones he sees as people who should be eradicated, which I like that. Because it's a very supervillain sort of motive. Oh, you've not suffered like I have, therefore I'm going to make you all suffer. I like that, but I also like that it makes him the perfect antagonist for David Dunn, because David Dunn can't suffer because he physically is incapable of it.
Oh yeah.
He's unbreakable, so the idea that he is the embodiment of everything he doesn't like is actually kind of a, again, cool,
and
yin and yang.
Yeah, I didn't really think that far ahead, but that is pretty cool. That is something I will enjoy seeing.
Well, let me blow your mind just one more time then.
Okay.
I don't know if you thought of this.
All right.
So we find out, obviously, Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Casey's the same, but to an extent, although it seemed a bit different. But Kevin was abused as a child from his mother. His mother beat him up and was abusive. We didn't get a super extent amount of what it was, but we've seen that she was violent. She used, I think it was a coat hanger she used on him, but probably various other makeshift weapons as well, I imagine. And we find out that he, like, all of his personalities, when they're not there, are in a room together, and they talk about whoever's in control is the one who has the light. And I assume this is maybe stuff that the psychiatrist has maybe taught him to sort of process everything, like
as a way to kind of make sense of
it's to manage
what's
it all
going on.
Yeah. That's the kind of impression I got. But they always talk about, the monster's coming on a train, and she says, this myth of the monster you've created, is it on a train because your dad left on a train? And we're thinking, all right, so the dad left and he left him with his mother. Given the age of Kevin, do we think, and I do, that his dad was on the train at the start of Unbreakable that Bruce Willis was on, and it all crashed because of Mr. Glass, and therefore Mr. Glass has created both Kevin, or the Beast, the Horde, and David Dunn?
Absolutely. I actually did think of that. Not by at first,
Shucks,
but
I was hoping to get the face of, oh my god, Peter, you're so smart.
well, no, it was actually funny because I did think about that, but it was because of something my girlfriend said when we were talking about it afterwards, because she's never actually seen Unbreakable.
All right. Okay.
And I think I'd like forgotten that thing about her dad or whatever, and we're just kind of like asking questions about it, and I said like, and why was like the train so important and stuff or something like that, and she was like, oh, didn't she say that like his dad left on a train or something when he was a kid, and I was like, yeah, and then like when like she said that, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
And then you're thinking, wait,
Yeah.
16, 17 years ago when the movie came out, that timeline kind of fits. Like,
Yeah.
that could have been him as a kid. I think he's a little bit older than, like, our age, so it doesn't fit perfectly, but it's close enough. It's like, yeah, I can buy that he's about that
It's
age.
like Hollywood years. You can
Yeah, you can mush it a little bit. Because it gave so much importance to this. Like, the train is where, he went to sort of, as whatever character he was at the time, I can't remember which personality. I think he was probably Dennis, which is the main one that we kept, who kidnapped the girls and stuff, and the OCD guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, he puts down the flowers in the train, and he waits till the train empties, and then he goes in, and that's when he does his like transformation into the beast.
No, the one it's not a huge complaint, but like a minor complaint is that I did have like a lot of questions, not necessarily like super impactful or anything, but one thing I wasn't really too sure about is like could it seemed like he had never been the beast before, that it was like coming out on this like special occasion, but I don't know, did they ever really explain like why or how it kind of like all of a sudden came? Because what I kept thinking throughout the movie is that he was gonna like sacrifice these girls to like unleash the beast or something like that, but no, it's just like all of a sudden,
Well, yeah, I can sort of piece it together. So the psychiatrist said that there was an incident because typically Dennis and Patricia, who was the female sort of personality, those were the two sort of crazier ones, and then to an extent the kid Hedwig, who was the 9-year-old personality. Those were typically shut away because they were sort of more dangerous, and the reason why they came out, and Barry, who was the character who was keeping them in check, he was the personality that was kind of the artsy one who designed dresses. He was typically in control before this, but that changed because there was an incident at work where a couple of teenage girls came up and like grabbed his hand it's kind of like a prank where they put his hands up their shirt, just kind of like a sort of high school thing. Most
weird.
Most guys would probably like, well, that was a freebie today. But he of course has like all these issues and stuff, and it sets him off a little bit, and that kind of let these personalities come to the forefront, and they started arranging all this. So I think it's like the trauma of that. Presumably he's never had like a proper sexual experience that's been with consent and stuff. I don't necessarily think it was ever implied that his mother did anything like that to him, but there's the sense,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that. It just seemed like kind of strange to me that it's like, I don't know, they has all these personalities, and don't get me wrong, I do like the idea of even among these personalities, there's like this unknown like monster personality that has yet to surface. Like that is a cool idea, but I don't know, I guess I would have liked maybe just a little bit more like clarification, like even if it was like. Even like if they said something like, oh, if they alluded to like you have to go back to the place of the incident to unleash this thing, or just something like, I don't know.
I think obviously the train has importance because we assume that was, well, we noticed his father was involved, but we assume it's the train and he died. It wasn't just that he left, he died on the train. Which is cool because again, Mr. Glass created this whole, like, he maybe didn't have this condition until this happened. This is what caused it.
Yeah.
And it's similar because it's funny because trauma is also what caused Mr. Glass to kind of create himself. Like it was the constant trouble in his childhood that was caused that, and that's a big thing. Even Casey's character, it was trauma in her childhood that made her the way she is, and we'll talk about her character in a bit. Don't worry. But all this stuff's so fascinating. But the whole thing with the monster, and she's saying, oh, it's not actually real. When the psychiatrist is talking to him, she's like, the beast, it doesn't exist. It's just this myth that all your personalities have created. And I was like, yeah, but surely he could just create a new one. Like, surely it can become a new personality. Like, he's made these other 23. Like, why not have 24th? Like, and that's essentially what happens when he transforms. That's the first time it becomes, and it's almost like he's built up the myth himself of all these things that it can be, and that it can climb on walls. And we see that at one point, of course.
And the other thing that kind of bugged me about it is, at some point, like after this all happened, I don't know if it was like the news reporter or someone. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think someone mentioned something about how the Beast was like a collection of all these animals at the zoo, or like something along those lines.
I don't think they specifically said it's a collection of all the animals at the zoo. I think they said it's not unlike the beasts that are at the zoo or something like that. I don't think it was specifically they were a collection. Again, I could be wrong.
I might I actually do want to see this movie again, because especially like knowing like what you know, just to
there's a lot
kind
of
pick up on stuff.
But even the fact, because obviously it turns out at the end that his base where he's working, because they keep mentioning his job and how he's finally found a job that lets him like deal with his problems while he's at work, and it's like, oh, where does he work? And you assume that it's maybe to do with this place that he's got the girls, because it's very industrial. It seems like it's underground somewhere, and it turns out that it's actually underneath the zoo in Philadelphia. That's where it is, and the whole thing about the animals, I actually kind of liked that, because I was like, well, did he get the idea of the Beast from all these animals because he's here, or was he attracted to the zoo because he already had that in him?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I always love like more animal stuff in movies. It's just the only reason why I just brought it up.
And we'll get to Casey's uncle soon. Don't you worry.
Oh God. The only reason why I brought it up is, and again, I might have misheard it, but I thought I heard something at the end where they mention it being a collection of animals or something, which I just thought was weird to throw in at the end.
She says something, but I don't know if it's. I don't think it's like she knows this. I think it's just speculation. It's like news. Okay. Just, I didn't take it as this is the actual diagnosis of.
That's completely fine then. That's not a big deal. If that's the case, that doesn't really bug me. It just going again. I saw this in theaters a couple of days ago. So
this was as the Unbreakable music was playing, and I was like just geeking out. So I mean, I could have misheard or not caught every word of what she said on the TV. So no, I like the monster thing, and obviously it becomes a little bit supernatural. And this is something I like, is that it does become supernatural. And we get that cool chase sequences when he's chasing Casey down those dark corridors, and he's like crawling on the ceiling, and it's like proper visually striking.
Yeah, he's like a licker from like Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, he is. Actually, that's a good comparison. He is.
But that scene was so well done. He's on the ceiling, like swatting the light bulbs, and then like crawling a little bit further and swatting again. That was terrific. That like there are again, like I don't want to sound like I'm too negative. There were definitely moments like that just like 100% worked for me, like A+++.
Anytime the camera was pointed at McAvoy, the movie was working basically. I mean, that's kind of that.
And and another thing I guess I kind of thought was weird at the time, but looking back on it now, it actually does kind of work. Is like when Patricia is like James McAvoy as Patricia is like making him sandwiches, and like she's like,
oh god, yeah, that scene was really good. Yeah, I like this.
But like it's weird. She's giving like all these like facts about like lions and tigers, which sounds really weird. But now looking back on it with the context of like the Beast, the zoo, and stuff.
I didn't even think of that. You just brought that on. Like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why she knows all this. It's because they work at the zoo. I didn't even think of that. I took that as her being quirky. Like, this is her thing. She has all these facts.
Well, yeah, like she gave off kind of like almost like a strict school teacher kind of vibe or something. So it'd be like she would know stuff like that.
Because the two girls, like Casey, the other girl, are like try to like sort of talk without talking, because she's Patricia, McAvoy's got his back turned, and they're trying to like form a plan. And at one point he slams the knife down, and it turns out it's because he's cut the sandwich crooked. Which, by the way, if you want to show someone is really crazy, this is what you do. You have them cut the sandwich vertically, because all I can think, no, he's definitely crazy, because normal people don't cut vertically; they cut horizontally or triangles. They don't do this straight down the middle line. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, that is strange.
All right, I want to sticking with McAvoy's character for a little bit, I do want to address a little bit of controversy with the movie. There is, like, some people have called for a boycott and stuff, and people are upset of the portrayal of the mentally ill in this movie. And I want to talk about this a little bit. I tend to try and avoid these really sticky issues because I don't want to come down on a side and like alienate people who have opinions on it. Although if you've made it this far into the review, you're probably not that offended by the movie. But I do, because it was on my mind. Because I'd heard people say it, and I was like thinking about it as I was watching it. Is this offensive? Is this, you know, playing with things that it shouldn't, and then giving this bad view of? And kind of part of my opinion before I saw it is kind of the same after I've seen it, which is I don't think any one movie is really that bad. Like, it isn't. I don't think this movie on its own is to blame for anything. I do think there is a blanket problem where movies and TV have painted mentally ill people as dangerous, and and I think that's something that is a problem, and we should have move away from that. I don't think one movie on its own is guilty of that specifically, if that makes sense. I think because so many do it, it's a problem. But because I mean, even Shyamalan's last movie was mentally ill villains.
Wait,
The Visit.
Oh, The Visit. Yeah, right. I blocked it out of my memory.
We spoke about that like at the start of the video. So I just wanted to address it. I do want to say that I don't think one movie on its own is the problem itself. I think as a blanket, it is. The other defense I would have in this movie, though, is that while it kind of starts like it's about the mentally ill, it very, very quickly becomes very fictitious and very clearly supernatural.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, and like I don't know, anyone with DID or whatever, and I'm sure it's like a very.
I don't know anyone with that. I've known people who are bipolar and stuff like that. Stuff that's a bit more. I think it's more common. I imagine it is.
Yeah. Well, I think, and again, could be completely wrong here. So, whatever. But I think there is even some like debate, like as to whether that it's like a proper disorder or something. Well,
that's kind of even brought up in the movie, because the psychiatrist is very much like, oh no, I think this is like almost a step into the supernatural, because all the different personalities can do all these different things, and the other guy's like, no, it's just a condition, they're patients, shut up, women. Is basically his response to that. So I know that's not the exact same thing, but it's kind of the same debate where one's like, oh, it's this thing, and the other's like, no, it's not that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know too much about it, but like I think what the movie does is it doesn't give you this viewpoint of everyone with DID is like dangerous. Like, it doesn't really do that. It's like this one particular man is dangerous, but I think he's dangerous before the disorder.
But Joe, I think it's interesting. I think it actually paints him himself as being really sympathetic, because not only do like 20 of the personalities seem like they're okay people and don't want to hurt anyone, when we actually meet Kevin, because obviously the psychiatrist like writes down as she's dying, because Kevin kills her. I say Kevin, the beast or whatever kills her, and she writes down, say his name, it's Kevin, and his full name, Kevin Wendell Crumb is the full thing, and Casey says it, and he turns back into Kevin, and he thinks it's 2014, so he's obviously the personalities have taken control for about 2 years or so, and he's like, wait, did I do that? He's like, he immediately's like, look, shoot me, kill me, like, I've got a shotgun, kill me. Like, he immediately he's really sympathetic. He seems terrified and mortified by what these other personalities are doing, so you do get a sense he's very sympathetic. The actual core person isn't a bad guy, and I'm not going to say that completely nullifies any guilt that it might have, but I don't think it is actually, at least I don't think it intentionally is trying to demonize anything. I think it's very clearly fictitious. It's very, this is not real life. This is this guy becomes indestructible. He turns into a Terminator at the end because of this disorder. So it's not, now maybe that is like mixed in with everything else that paints mentally ill people as being dangerous. Is it a problem as a whole? I think it is. I don't think one is. It's easy to forgive it though when the movie's good, which is kind of the thing I guess here is the issue. But I wanted to point out that it's not ignored. It was on my mind as I was watching it. How is this treating this? And
like I guess it's probably not really in our place to say much or have any type of judgment for it. If it offends you, it offends you, and that's like definitely in your right. But,
Yeah, and I can't even super argue against you and say you shouldn't be
yeah.
offended. I
I think there is problematic stuff, and not just with him, like with Casey's backstory and stuff. I could see people maybe not so much being offended, but maybe something that they would not want to, it might something that may need like some type of trigger warning or something. You know what I mean? Like for some people,
it's a sensitive subject. Just to warn you before you go on.
It's
that
sensitive
kind of
subject, exactly. Yeah,
which
but I don't think anything comes from a particularly like it's not like you said, it's not trying to demonize the person. It's not like it doesn't feel like exploitative. You know what I mean? Like it feels more like no, this is the story.
Yeah, it feels like, oh, I've got this great idea where a good actor can play like 24 characters in one person, and some of them are dangerous, and that's such a good storytelling opportunity that I get why that's an idea. I get why someone thought that'd be a good idea, and knowing that it's actually the setup and it's the origin of a supervillain for the hero character that we got in another movie makes it vastly more interesting. The idea that because it's almost like trauma has created. It's Batman. Like, seriously, think about it. Like, trauma created Batman. Trauma. We don't get to see the Joker's origin, but look at every other Batman villain. Trauma created Two-Face. Trauma created whoever. Like, trauma creates heroes and villains, and that's what this is. It's taking those tropes of superheroes and it's playing them in a very grounded and straight way, but at the same time letting them be indestructible and letting them be this and that. And as that type of story, I found it very fascinating. And I guess we're going on to Casey's story here, and because that's kind of the main crux of the movie, and it relates a lot to his story as well, because she's also had trauma. And we get these flashbacks to her and her father took her out hunting with his brother, her uncle, and the first scene we get them just sort of at a diner or whatever, and they're at a restaurant, and they're kind of bonding, and the dad and brother are just making fun of each other and kind of stuff. And you get the sense, not right away, but there's I guess the third flashback where the dad's asleep and the uncle's like, oh, Casey, do you want to come and do some stuff or whatever? And I'm like, wait, I'm getting creepy vibes from this now. What's he up to? And let's play our games. It's like, let's pretend to be animals. And he goes around the corner, like behind like a rock and some bushes and stuff. And then she walks down, and he's in his underwear, pretending to be a dog. I think I can't remember. I don't remember what the animal was, but
four-legged animal.
It wasn't the focus. My focus wasn't on what animal he's being. My focus was on he's taking his clothes off, and we're in straight up rapey, creepy uncle territory here. And he convinces her to start to do the same, and she's here on zip, and it cuts. And then there's this scene that follows immediately after this, where she gets her dad's shotgun, and she points it at him, and she's going to shoot him, but she just doesn't do it. She doesn't pull the trigger, and the uncle grabs the gun. And this is very much, and as we learned about these flashbacks throughout the movie, it really painted as to who she was. And because we heard at the start, she goes to detention a lot, and we hear her tell Hedwig that she goes to detention on purpose so she can be alone and she doesn't have to go anywhere. And it ties up, okay, she doesn't want to go home. And then, later on there's a small scene at a funeral that lets us know that her dad died and her uncle got custody, which, oh crap, she's in hell. She's with the creepy uncle full time. And I mean, those scenes, I think they were okay. They weren't amazing. The scenes with the kid, they maybe could have been played a little bit better. But I liked what they did to the rest of the story, because when they first get kidnapped, Casey's immediately, the other girls are like, all right, we need to try and do this. They're being very practical. They're trying to think, how can we fight back? How can we beat up this guy? Because there's three of us, one of him. Can we do this? Can we do that? And Casey's just very like, no, we don't know what this is yet. We should wait and see. And at the time, you almost read it as she's being smarter. She's going to be the smart one who has a strategy and learns stuff, and that's how you kind of read it at first. But then when you see these flashbacks and the movie goes on, you realize it's the opposite. She's scared and she doesn't know how to fight back. She's too quick to accept her fate as a victim, and that's kind of the whole thing with the shotgun. She couldn't pull the trigger. She didn't turn her uncle in and tell her dad. She didn't do any of that. She lived with the pain, and she was already a victim. She was already a captive. She just traded one captor for another, and she was kind of just going along with it, and that's kind of her character. And her arc throughout the movie is that eventually she does fight, find the courage to fight back and run. And obviously when she goes to shoot the beast at the end, he just keeps coming because he's supernatural now, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, see, I didn't really enjoy this part too much. Like, I get why they did it, but it was just such a like 180 for me, because when they first set it up, yeah, I kind of thought like they're showing all this stuff with her, like, hunting with her dad, and her dad teaching her, like the stuff about the wilderness and hunting and whatnot. So I thought like, oh, okay, like she's gonna be this badass, that's like, oh, like I know what to do, like he thinks that he has us captured, but really like, yeah, I'm just like laying the groundwork for my plan or something.
You wanted your next kind of
like I
twist on it. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe that's just unfair of me to kind of judge something by like, oh well, I wanted this to happen but it didn't, but I
get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I think for me, because it relates so well to Kevin's story, and the idea that because if she didn't stand up eventually to her captor and didn't break out of her own prison, that she would eventually maybe become a villain herself one day. She would go down a route similar to his, and so her actually fighting back at the end is the sort of the arc. And at the end of the movie, when the police find her and they bring her out, and the policewoman comes up to the car that she's sitting in and says, "Oh, okay, that's your uncle here. He can come and get you." And that look she gives the cop, and she hesitates, and it implies that she is going to do the right thing here, and she's going to. This is giving her the strength to turn them in and end this pain, that she can't just be a prisoner, because that's what leads to the trauma that Kevin's went through.
But again, I think this would really benefit, at least for me, on giving it a second watch, because if I could kind of watch it now, knowing everything, and then not having baggage, and not like trying to guess the twist, and then not thinking like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a story about a badass, getting this guy, like, I think if I can just watch it for what it is and not have all these like preconceived notions, I might enjoy it.
I think that's a weird thing between us, because my problem is because I thought it was connected to Unbreakable, that was spoiled for me. I kept thinking, how is this connected? And I got the whole, this is the supervillain origin, and for me, once I got to that realization, I stopped thinking about it and just enjoyed it as that. Whereas for you, because you're looking for a twist, I think that maybe took away from just taking in what the characters were and what their arcs were, and what the correlations between her and Kevin, and getting through your own personal prison. Because even Kevin himself is imprisoned himself in his mind, is what the movie's getting at with all the other personalities, and that it's created, and be doing that for so long and not getting help and not fighting back, it's created this monster, this beast. And in a way, the movie's kind of about not giving up. It's about so that's kind of a positive message in the end for what is essentially a very dark movie. And I think you can criticize it. You can argue that maybe some of that's maybe not clear enough, or you could argue that maybe the little girl's acting kind of makes, and the way they portray the uncle scenes is a little bit.
I mean, it's a little creepy, and then plus like the.
I think it's supposed to be creepy though. Like, I don't think how do you do that without it being creepy?
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, granted, but it's still not necessarily something I want to watch. Like, I understand it's necessary for the story, but there's also just kind of like in general, like it felt a little gratuitous at times, like when like the other girls like had to like take off their shirts and stuff, and
that's a fair complaint. Do you know what's annoying about that is I can kind of see the line of thinking though.
Yeah,
I can see the line of thinking where the whole
the one guy that does it, Dennis, they give him like kind of a creepy, likes to watch young girls dance.
He's the perverted one that's when Patricia comes in and says, oh, he's not to touch you. That's in the trailer actually. That line, he knows he's not supposed to touch you. And he does this thing where if they get their clothes dirty, he demands they take that part of the clothing off because he's got OCD, but it feels like an excuse just to have them undress. From his point of view, and maybe from the movie's point of view, which is a shame because even though obviously horror movies in the 80s did this a lot where they'd have girls undressed for no reasons, this felt particularly just kind of exploitative. However, this is what I like to say about the line of thinking though. I even though I agree with that point, and it did make me a bit uncomfortable to have, one of the girls is in, just her underwear in the bottom half,
like most of the movie,
and the other girl is just in her bra for an extended period of time. Well, I do think there was a better way of doing this, and I don't know what it was. I do think there was a reason for it, because basically Casey's character, this happens to her too. He says, take off that jacket, it's got dirty. And okay, she's got a shirt underneath, whatever, no big deal. And then that gets dirty, or from something, and he says, right, take that shirt off. Takes it off. And she's got another shirt on. And he even comments, you've got a lot of shirts. And I get what they're saying here, because obviously at the end of the movie, when she runs away and her last shirt gets ripped and she's down to like her little tank top or whatever at the end, we see that she's got all these marks, she's been beaten, she's been bruised, she's, her uncle's been abusing her in a variety of ways, and we see all that. And that's actually, that's the big thing at the end that makes the beast stop. He sees her as another victim, so he backs off because he doesn't think she needs to be punished. And I think the whole point of the clothes was that, unlike the other two, who are coddled, which is what the beast wanted, he wanted these coddled people who had never suffered or anything like that. The idea is, unlike them, she's more armoured. She wears layers and layers of clothes because she wants to be closed off from everyone else. And
that makes sense.
They don't. They're like typical teenagers who, I don't want to say they dress slutty, but she's got a miniskirt on. The typical teenage girl, I want to be kind of sexy, kind of look.
Well, and actually, what's a good point though, going back to what you said like a little earlier though, is I do like that they, like they were a little more like a typical teenage girl, but they weren't that over exaggerated like Hollywood version.
Yeah,
where they're just like super, slutty and like. Oh my god!
At the start of the movie, when the dad and the two girls are waiting for her, because her lift's not showing up, presumably her uncle isn't on the way, or she's lying about it because she doesn't want to go home. Well,
that's why I kind of thought maybe she was lying.
It probably is more that. By the way, I really like that whole scene where they get in the car and the way it's filmed and the way she almost
was great.
She almost gets out, and it's actually the beeping that the car makes when the door opens that alerts him, even though she's sitting right next to him. It's like he's oblivious to her. And which you buy because of his mindset. He's so, because we find out, of course, that she wasn't meant to be there. He only wanted those two in the back. She just was there by chance. Yeah.
It's kind of weird. And I find that this works with some shots and then turns me off on other ones. But I feel like M. Night Shyamalan really isn't afraid to take his time. Like that, scene in the car, like it feels like very long, like drawn out. Like it's not like he gets in there and instantly attacks him. Like he gets in there and he's kind of like dusting the car a little bit, and the girls at first are kind of like, oh wait, I think you have the wrong car, and then and everything's kind of slow and drawn out, and I thought it was great. But then there was a couple other instances throughout the movie where he just had these really kind of like long, slow shots that I don't know. Sometimes it worked for me and sometimes it didn't.
I think
sometimes it seemed a little unnecessary.
I think they mostly work for me. I certainly like that kind of, because Unbreakable had a lot of slow shots and stuff, and I appreciated that in that movie, and I did here for the most part as well. Admittedly, if you pointed out some of the ones you didn't like, that you thought, that felt poorly paced, I might agree with you. I'd
say overall I liked it more than didn't like it, but every now and again there would just be like a shot that I'm like, it feels like it's lingering a little bit. Or
I will say this though, I don't think the pacing was bad though. I never felt like it was going, overall, like I thought, this is going slow. Is this?
I was like
halfway.
I was never bored.
Yeah. The point I was getting at though earlier, because I was talking about the opening scene with the dad and her waiting for her car. Just to go back to the girls not being complete, typical cliche bitchy popular girls. The girls kind of argue with the dad, like, oh, well, she's kind of weird and she doesn't do this. But when the dad says it's not a discussion, we're taking her home, we're not leaving her behind. When she comes over and they explain this, the girls are nice enough to her. Like she cracks a little joke. Oh, if you don't come with us, you won't hear my dad's bad jokes. And she seems genuine. Like she's making an effort, and it's like, cool.
Yeah, I did like that. That instantly kind of like warms you up to them.
Yeah, they're not just. I mean, I wouldn't say they have deep characters. We don't learn a whole lot about them.
Yeah,
they're there for what they're there. They're meant to be typical, but decent human beings, decent teenage girls who aren't awful, and that's fine. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's kind of weird in the movie. It feels like like it's pretty consistent throughout, but then there's just like a few times um where it just felt like I don't think this movie should be trying to do this. Like the scene with M. Night Shyamalan's character
Hmm.
and the therapist, like, you know, they're watching the security cameras, that's fine. But then like they go off on this little tangent about Hooters that I just thought like this doesn't seem like the right movie for this like conversation. And then also the other scene where the therapist is like talking to her friend or whatever, they're watching like Wheel of Fortune, and then the character keeps having like all these like asides to the TV show. I don't know, for me it just didn't really like fit like in this type of movie, you know. Like I don't know, it feels more like, oh, these are like interesting conversations, but I'd expect to see them in
You
like
know,
a
I'd forgotten about the Wheel of Fortune scene
yeah.
with the neighbor. Yeah.
It just sticks out to me like, oh, this would be more in like a slice of life kind of movie,
Yeah, no,
you know.
I get what you're saying. None of them bothered me. Admittedly, now that I'm looking back on, especially the neighbor one,
Yeah.
because at least the security camera bit, I got with the point of that scene is that they're checking to see if he still acted like that personality when he left the building
Yeah.
outside. Um, the Wheel of Fortune one, yeah, I can't remember what the purpose of that is.
It's like I think it was a little bit of a exposition dump. Like I think she was like, you know, her neighbor was like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with those crazy people? And she's like, oh, they're not crazy, they are like this and this and
Yeah,
this,
it
and
was
kinda,
to let us know the psychiatrist a little bit more, which is fine. I think, yeah, it was kind of a weirder set. It was like almost like a quirky, I don't know, like almost Wes Anderson slash David Lynch kind of
Yeah,
little insert
like,
of just this. Oh, this neighbor's cookie, and she likes to buy things she's on TV.
yeah.
Uh,
And it's just like I don't know, it's just certain stuff like that through the movie just takes me out a little bit. And like this movie was about like 2 hours long. I don't know, I feel like there wasn't like a ton that like I super hated or whatever, but I feel like if you just cut out a little bit for me, I would have been a lot more like
hmm,
positive about it, you know.
maybe.
Just some weird stuff like that and again,
That
you know,
said, though,
maybe if I see it again, you know.
someone's going to analyze that scene and tell us what it's really about, and
Oh sure.
her Wheel of Fortune rant represents this. Maybe I'm going to try to do it actually. Right, so maybe the implication is that the Wheel of Fortune is like Kevin's personalities. And it's like every time he spins
Okay.
the wheel.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
I like
I'm reaching.
that.
I'm reaching here, but I'm just.
I can see that though. No, that's not bad.
I thought I'd give it a go. What we got left? With the other Casey. Yeah.
Yeah, I did like the well, all right. Well, two things I want to talk about is
Okay.
the therapist towards the end. One positive, one negative.
So she comes to his place. She comes to where he works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Because
it
she's
was just
worried. Because that's what I just mentioned the plot point that why she keeps even interacting with him is because one of his personalities, when the three main ones that we keep seeing aren't like paying attention, is trying to message for help. So it's like some of his personalities are trying to fight to save the girls, which is a really cool idea in of itself.
Yeah, I liked that. But yeah, this is just one of those like annoying like horror movie moments when you want to kind of scream at the character, but it was just such a like, oh, why did you not like? You're going to this person's house who presumably you probably think is a danger to himself or others, and he's saying like such like creepy stuff about the beast, and like you don't call the police or get any backup or let anyone know what you're
This
doing.
is the thing. I on the way there,
Mhm.
I see what you're saying, right? I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think she's maybe elevated to that level of threat yet, right? However, what I did really like, and I've got a complaint here as well, but what I did really like is that when she goes in and talks to him, and it becomes clear throughout the conversation that, oh crap, he is dangerous, right? You can see her realize it mid-scene, and then she really wisely and really smartly goes, well, I think we should talk about this more in a session tomorrow, and she's getting her ass out of there, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is smart. She's realized that this is actually dangerous. She's leaving, and she can go and get help and bring back the police force, whatever, or even just other people, like people to back her up, so that she's got some muscle. And then she puts like the handkerchief in the door like stub.
To be honest, I wasn't really sure what that was trying to do. Like, I didn't know if that was trying to like.
If at first I thought it was to make it quiet, so that if you shut the door, it wouldn't make as much of a noise. But then I wasn't sure. I think it was so she would hear him. It would make it less of a noise, though. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like, oh, so he can't lock the door, but then it's like, well, wait, is she trying to get back in, or is she trying to keep him in, or something, or I don't know.
But then she goes snooping, and she says she used to go to the bathroom, and she's going to go snooping, and this is when I thought, no, this is dumb. I thought you were talking your way out of the building so you could leave and get help.
Yeah.
Because I thought you were realizing, even if you didn't necessarily think, oh, he's got girls kidnapped here, you can go and get help because you think he's a danger. It's too dangerous to be here on your own because he's a guy. You're an old woman. He'll win the fight. Basically, is what I'm saying. And she opens one of the doors and sees the girl, and of course Dennis has to intervene and leads to her death.
Yeah.
And that's right before he goes out to the train station to do his old transformation. And I loved all the beast stuff. I loved all the transformation. I thought it was super creepy, especially the way that when he first transformed, we never seen his eyes. It just kept like below his nose kind of framing until right at the end, after that cool hallway shot of him breaking all the lights and crawling on the ceiling.
Yeah. And then that my positive point was going to be, even though like I was a little bit like screaming at her like, no, don't do that, you're so stupid, I did enjoy like their final like confrontation. I thought that was like really well done, and just like, seeing him like, I think he climbs up a little bit when he first gets to her, and then like you kind of like see his back and it's all like veiny, and then he like grabs her and is crushing her, and then she's the one that like stabs him with the knife, right? Or is that Casey later?
No, it's her because the knife breaks. Yeah,
and then that was just like really cool. That's like when you're already like, oh crap, like he's something else now, but then that's just kind of like,
this wasn't the same scene though, because he leaves her on the floor, she's not dead yet, and he goes and transforms, and then he comes back, and that's when he grabs her. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't like that first scene of her like going to there, had that kind of usual horror movie problem, but then I did like that ending between them when he arrives.
He's just crushing her with his arms, and she tries to stab him with his knife, and it just shatters, and it's like, oh crap, oh dear, things have just gotten real. And he starts eating the other two girls. Casey finds them being eaten, and that's when we get the cool like sort of almost it's kind of an empowering thing for her in a way, even though she kind of fails. And that's the only part of the message that's kind of weird, is that as much as I'm saying she builds up and she gets the courage to do this, and she does fight back, it doesn't work. And that kind of that makes the message a little bit weird. But then it's implied at the end, to me at least, that the look she gives the police officer, that she is going to turn him in and be like, no, he's doing this to me. I can talk about this now. I don't have to be trapped anymore. If I can fight out of that, then I can fight out of this. So the shotgun not working on him does kind of weird the message up a little bit, but I still think it's there. Let's talk about the actual ending though, because we've talked about what it means to be connected to Unbreakable. I just want to mention how, so we get all this stuff with her, and her story finishes, and you can almost cut it to black on her looking at the cop. Like, you could almost just cut to black and roll credits, and that's the ending, and it would have worked. But we get these shots going up these stairs, and this piano theme, and I was like, that sounds kind of like Unbreakable. And it's when it gets up to him at the top, it properly kicks in the Unbreakable theme. And it's when he's talking to his different personalities in the two mirrors, which I love, because this is a callback to Unbreakable. I don't know if you remember, but every time we were introduced to Samuel L. Jackson's character in Unbreakable, who turned out to be the villain, Mr. Glass at the end, every time we're introduced to him in the past or in the present, the first like 3 or 4 times we see him, we always see him first in a reflection. It was like a theme of the movie. We kept seeing him in the reflection of a TV, in the reflection of it was a frame in his comic book gallery, one of the transitions.
But I gotta go back and watch it.
It was in the opening scene when he's being born. It's in a department store, and there's like a big mirror. It's in the changing room.
Oh, right.
And the whole shot's focused on the mirror rather than the people themselves.
Interesting.
So that was like a running theme. So them bringing that in here, but also turning into one personality's in that mirror and the other one's in that mirror. It kind of mixed the two movies together in a really cool way. Plus, I think one of the mirrors was cracked as well, which gave it the imagery of, you know, the whole split thing.
Yeah.
And the music's playing, and I'm like, holy crap, this is the Unbreakable music from, you know, James Newton Howard. This is the score from Unbreakable, and it's properly setting him up. And then it cuts to the title, which we hadn't seen yet. And I thought, oh, maybe that's the end. Maybe it's just the music. But then I thought, maybe it can't be, though, because, like, as much as I get that it's Unbreakable now, it's connected to it, for a lot of people, I don't think that would be enough. Yeah. So sure enough, it cuts to this diner, and we see the newscaster talking about it, how he's, you know, he's at large, and we're calling him the Horde because I think that's why they said that he's like an amalgamation of all the animals, because he's got all these personalities that are all animalistic. Yeah. Hence the Horde. Yeah. That was why they said that. So again, very kind of media giving him a name and justifying it with stuff.
No, I think this is when it clicked in for me, because I'm a really big fan of Unbreakable as well, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. I didn't recognize the score, but that is really cool. Again, it'll be fun to go back and rewatch that now. But
that's what I was saying. If I hadn't had this spoiled, the moment it would have like sent me going was the music. If I'd have heard it, because I listen to that soundtrack a lot. It's one of my favorite scores. So as soon as that hit, I'd have been jumping.
Yeah, I think when it kind of hit for me is during the newscaster, I think they mentioned something about it being in Philadelphia, and then and for some reason that kind of like started to trickle into my brain a little bit, and then I think like she says, like, you know, we haven't seen something this bad since, and that's when I was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, is this gonna be like, that's when it kind of started kicking up, and then just seeing the little bit of like Bruce Willis kind of appear out, you're like, oh, okay.
And the camera, like, you know, it does that cool thing where you know it's going to reveal something because it slowly comes down from the TV and it starts going through the diner, and I kept looking for the bald head. I was like, I bet he's here. Bruce Willis is in this diner somewhere, and it goes up to this on TV, and it sort of spins round, and it's these two women talking about, oh, this is kind of like that guy like 15 years ago. What was he called? And then you see Bruce Willis, like, it reveals him sitting next to it, and he just sort of like sighs and goes, Mr. Glass. And that is a small complaint I have, is that I don't think he needed to say that. I feel like this dialogue was on the nose. I feel like had he not said it, had they just left, like, oh yeah, this reminds me of that train guy like 15 years ago. Had they just left, and then we see just Bruce Willis look up at the TV and then cut to black, that would have been enough. Like, it's like, okay, he knows there's a villain out there that he needs to deal with. Hype. David Dunn versus the Horde, and whatever they're going to call it. Broken, maybe they'll call it Broken. I don't know.
Oh, that's not bad.
I don't think they'll call it Unbreakable 2. I would bet money against it just being called Unbreakable 2.
Yeah,
that'd be my guess. But
unsplittable.
Unsplittable. Put back together.
Oh, there you go. Or wait. Unbreakable v Horde, Dawn of something. I don't know.
No. I wonder if David Dunn's got a superhero name now. Like, maybe if he's been doing things here or there throughout the years that they've given him a name. I don't know.
I kind of would like it if his name was just Unbreakable.
Really? You think they'd call him that?
Well, I don't know if people would actually call him that, but I'd like if that's like what he goes by. Just because it's something like, I think it works as a name, but something that you don't really, hear very often. Like, mostly everything's like man or something.
Yeah, no, I get you. Even the Horde's a cool name, actually. I actually really like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is like all these different personalities, so it's the Horde of, it works. It's pretty cool. And he is very animalistic as well. So, so that's pretty cool.
So, definitely one of the best, like, non-comic book based
absolutely
movies.
This is the thing, is I love, and I said this when we first talked about it, but I love Unbreakable because it's like, this is the other thing actually, that this character was meant to be an Unbreakable. I don't know if you knew this about the making of Unbreakable, but originally he was writing that as like a traditional superhero movie, and there was going to be like a bigger villain introduced, which was going to be the Horde in like the second half. And it was going to be very typical, whereas, first act origin, second act build up the villain, third act fight. But I remember like all the extra features back, and when Unbreakable came out in like DVD and stuff, he said, but the part I was like, it felt too packed in. I didn't feel like I was actually getting to really do anything interesting with it. So the first movie, Unbreakable, was just the first act. That entire movie is just about becoming the hero, realizing that he is a superhero. And this is essentially, I guess, is Act 2. This is building up the supervillain. This is building up the arch nemesis. And I think I prefer. I don't know. Unbreakable's better. I think this is a few bit clunkier. The psychiatrist character is definitely clunky. There's a couple of things. The girls being undressed is a little bit exploitative. And there's a couple of bits of dialogue here or there that I'd have changed. But for the most part, I'm really happy. I can't believe I came out of this feeling as happy as I did about a Shyamalan movie.
Yeah.
It works on its own as a horror movie. The ending probably makes you scratch your head if you've not seen Unbreakable. You're probably, what the hell's this? I don't get it. That's fair.
Yeah, I had to explain it to my girlfriend because she hadn't seen it before. But she wasn't like totally like, what? I don't understand. Like.
Do at the same time though. At the same time, I feel like that's just something that's necessary with this. For this to be a surprise, they can't bill it as it's a spin-off to Unbreakable, or it's this or it's that.
Right, yeah.
For it to be a surprise, they just have to accept the fact that people who don't know about Unbreakable won't get the little thing at the end.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. But for people who have seen Unbreakable, it's super exciting. For the people who like Unbreakable, it is like, holy shit, this is setting up the villain for him. This is it's great.
And it's also cool, like, it works for them. And if you did enjoy the movie, chances are you probably would like Unbreakable. And it's cool that now they have something to discover that they might have not otherwise.
But again, I love that the villain movie is a horror movie. Like, it's a different genre. The superhero movie, which is, it's a fairly dark superhero movie. It's very grounded and sort of gritty, and the best way possible. Not the way that they keep trying to make things gritty with Batman v Superman. And then you have the villain and built up like this, and it's just it's great. It should be a horror movie. The villain story and his origin should be horrific, and to a regular person, to a regular person, the villain, a super villain or a superhero, should be kind of horrific. It should be scary that these people can do this. It's almost the kind of thing that Batman v Superman was trying to do. Like, cause they always said, this is a realistic take, where how would real people react if there was Superman? They'd be terrified. Like, this is doing that, but good, proper.
But actually working. Yeah,
working, because it isn't Superman, because we shouldn't be scared of Superman, because he's Superman. And this is, this is where we're terrified of what this character can do and what he can become. It's horror. It's downright evil and creepy. It's great.
And there's actually like a point for the piss in this movie.
Yeah, someone does piss themselves at one point, but understandably she's scared because she thought she was about to be raped, and that's something that's kind of there throughout, is you think Dennis might rape them, and obviously Patricia says no, he's not allowed to do that, but he still keeps making them take off clothes, so that weird psychological threat's always kind of there. But no, I really like Split. I am ecstatic to say that. I really like Split. I am ecstatic that we have an Unbreakable cinematic universe.
The Shyamalan, there's got to be a name for it, Shyamalan verse or something.
Oh god.
If they're thinking of it.
No, let's just keep it to those two. I don't want to. I like obviously Sixth Sense and Signs, but let's not bring them into.
The lady in the water into this.
Hey, Lady in the Water had a really good music, and it had a good idea. It was just he went off the rails a bit with the script on that one.
Maybe they can have the dude that has like one jacked arm can be the next
that was stupid.
like guy to join.
All I could think about that is like, that's clearly your wanking arm. Like, you masturbate with that one, and that one doesn't get used, and that's why it's like that. Don't tell me it's because you're lifting weights with one and not the other.
Oh yeah.
Tim, you got to switch hands. It's important for your health.
Hey, you don't have to tell me.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's better if you can let someone else do it and you just relax. But if you do it yourself, switch hands. Good for you. All right, this is actually one of the longest episodes we've ever done, especially just the two of us. So this is actually kind of impressive. And I thought this would be long because there's so much to talk about. Yeah. So I recommend this. I think it works as a horror movie. I think it works as a thriller. I think McAvoy is fantastic, switching between the personalities. I think Anya Taylor-Joy is very good in her role. And then, as a fan of Unbreakable, and what it does is the setting up the villain and how it completely reframes, because the movie works without it, but it just gives it this new sort of like frame around it where it just works in this second way as well. And as that, I also love it, and I love Unbreakable, so that works for me. So, again, Psychiatrist clunky, a couple of nitpicks here or there about dialogue and things, and the sexualized stuff was a bit weird and out of place. 8.5 is what I'm going to.
wow.
I'm going to rock an 8.5 with this one. I am enthusiastic about Split. Tim, what would you give it out of 10?
I'm definitely gonna be a lot lower. It's really hard because the stuff that I like is like a 10, you know. But there's also just like a lot of it was a lot of like little minor complaints, but they really added up and took out of the movie for me. So I'm gonna give it a 6.5, which maybe sounds a little harsh, but there was a lot that I still did really like, and again I want to see it again. So maybe maybe I have some time to think about it.
I think a second viewing would work for you, but what I do like is that someone who's unsure about the movie, and for some maybe they don't care about spoilers, so they've watched this whole thing, they get like my really excited to get your sort of more mute, lukewarm reception. Maybe that sets them up for expectations that are in a reasonable place, so that they're not overhyped from me or underhyped from you. So
I would still definitely recommend people, like I wouldn't try to drive someone away from not seeing it, because I think it is really interesting and does a lot of stuff well. And at the very least, the parts that didn't work, it was never anything that would make me like want to walk out of a movie. It's like, oh, that doesn't work, but it's still like an interesting thing. So I still would highly recommend seeing it. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool. That's Split, ladies and gentlemen. We went a long time in that. Hopefully that was an enjoyable discussion. Let us know what you thought of Split in the comments below. We're always curious to hear. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. Obviously remember, me and Tim do weekly Tales from the Crypt sort of mini reviews that are like 10-15 minutes. We're just working our way through. We're a good 2/3 through season 2 at this point.
Which I know it's delayed now, but this does make me a little more hopeful for the Shyamalan Tales from the Crypt, if it ever comes out.
If it ever comes out, yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, check out the other stuff we're doing. Other movie reviews from me and Matt, and TV reviews from me and Connor. So that's everything on the channel.
Do you have new stuff you can talk about yet, or is that
new stuff?
New shows we're doing?
There is at least one new show that's coming up.
Okay.
If there's multiple, I've forgotten about something, so I'll need to ask Tim what he's talking about. But
well, there's one that's similar to this one a little bit that I think if people like this show, they'd probably be interested in. I'm not sure if you put them out yet, though.
No, there's nothing new yet.
Okay.
I will say there is a new show starting at the beginning of February. So next week, there's about a week from now, there'll be the first episode of a new thing out.
So they have a little bit of a tease now.
A little bit of a tease.
Right.
So, but yeah, guys, thanks very much for watching. Let us know what you think. Thanks for sticking with us for this long review. But you know what? If we get good discussion, I'm happy to keep rolling until we're done. So, thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching horror movies. We're out.